Shadow Slave. By Guiltythree. Chapter 1186, Final Preparations. Morgan studied the distant army of song and inhaled deeply. Then, her face grew slightly somber. There are countless nuances to war, Master Sunless, but at its core, war is simple. All there is to it is power, and application of power. The former is important, but the latter is more so. There is no point in being strong if one can't properly exert their strength, after all. The daughters of Ki Song might think that they possess more power. But look at them. I have them exactly where I wanted them, even if the path to this moment was not what I expected it to be. Ah, but that is another thing. One has to be flexible when waging war. Rigid things are always the first to break. With a chill, Sunny realized that Morgan had been acting throughout the entire attempt at negotiations. She had never wanted the duel to happen. She had never wanted to avoid the battle. Instead, all she had wanted was to lure the enemy into committing to it. In the end, it was Beastmaster who insisted on proceeding with the battle, thinking that she had forced Morgan into a corner. He shook his head in amazement. Why is everyone in that family so devious? Well, it was not like he had anything to complain about. Morgan had said a lot of things, but conveniently failed to actually answer his question and explain what exactly gave her the confidence to face the superior force of Clan Song on the battlefield. Still, her confidence was a good sign for him. Sunny let out a sigh. Now, all he had to decide was how far he was willing to go to ensure that valor achieved a sweeping victory. What was he willing to show, and what was he willing to hide? The unpleasant answer was rather simple: Sunny had no right to hide anything. He had to give it his all unless he wanted to make every decision he had made thus far meaningless. Even if abandoning his pretenses might end up putting him in danger. It was time to go all out. Morgan, meanwhile, turned to her soldiers and smiled. Her voice echoed across the plain, sounding as sharp as a sword leaving its scabbard: warriors of valor. Today, we sanctify this field with blood. Have no fear. Have no mercy. Have no doubt. The 1,000 awakened roared, and as they did, Morgan coldly looked at the knights among them and gave a small nod. In the next moment, something strange happened. Sharp steel flashed, and a dozen dead bodies fell to the ground, awash in blood. It happened so fast that no one even had a chance to react. Morgan shook her head slightly and said with contempt, "Did she really think that I wouldn't find her thralls?" Then, she looked at the frozen soldiers with murderous determination, unsheathed her strange sword, and yelled, "The traitors are dead. Be strong. Be sharp. Be my sword." And as she did, the dim twilight was suddenly illuminated by a myriad of scarlet sparks. A hurricane of them, much larger than the one produced by manifesting echoes, surrounded Morgan like a river of blood. From that river, hundreds of swords slowly appeared, hovering above ground. All of them. All of them were memories, and of considerable power at that. No sword was the same as the rest, each possessing a unique form, shape, and presence. And there was something strange about these swords, too, just like there was about the one she was holding in her hand. Sunny stared at the cloud of swords, stunned, until he noticed a common detail that all of them shared. Each had a symbol of an anvil pierced through by a sword either etched on its blade or engraved on its pommel. All of those are forged memories. Sunny watched as countless swords suddenly flew in different directions, each landing in the hand of an awakened warrior. And as he did, he felt that he knew what these swords were, and who had created them. Anvil of Valor. The King of Swords. These swords had to be a conduit of his domain, or at least a manifestation of his aspect ability. Nephi's received a silvery longsword, and Cassie received a slender rapier. Sunny and Jet, though, did not receive anything. Which was, honestly, a relief. While the two of them were observing the grandiose bestowal of swords with guarded expressions, Morgan turned to them and smiled. "Master Sunless, Master Jet. If there are any preparations you want to make, I suggest that you make them now. We are about to begin." Jet silently leaned on her glaive, showing that she was already as prepared as she wanted to be. Sunny, on the other hand, did have a few things to do. With a sigh, he called upon several memories. The Sin of Solace, the Dying Wish, the Shadow Lantern. And Morgan's warbow. When scarlet sparks swarmed around his hand, Morgan tilted her head slightly, as if surprised. When the black bow manifested itself, however, one of her eyebrows shot up. The princess gave him a strange look. "That is a curious bow you have there, Master Sunless." Sunny glanced at it and smiled. "Ah, yes. I might have forgotten to mention. But you sort of stole my heart once, Lady Morgan. It was a truly memorable day. Well, at least for me." The expression on her face was hard to describe, but it became even more incredulous when Sunny threw the bow into the air. "Wait. You are..." A moment later, a hand in a black armored gauntlet suddenly rose from his shadow and grabbed it. Two crimson flames ignited in the darkness, and then, a towering figure in a fearsome suit of onyx armor stepped from the shadow, her silhouette both graceful and frightening. Saint remained motionless, observing the distant army of the great clan Song with utter indifference. Then, a demonic black steed rose from the shadows, wreathed in darkness. Nightmare lowered his head, light reflecting on his adamantine horns. Lastly, a small fiendish creature made entirely of black steel appeared, staring at the horde of enthralled nightmare creatures with unmistakable hunger. Shadows moved, flowing onto Sunny's body. As they did, the light of day suddenly seemed darker and less substantial around them. He placed the Sin of Solace on his shoulder and looked at Morgan. "Now, I'm ready." Chapter 1187 Battle of the Black Skull. There were a lot of startled glances directed at Sunny. Of course, it couldn't be helped, even though he was a master, thus receiving a certain amount of respect and veneration from all awakened, the warriors of a great clan still tended to treat government soldiers with a bit of disdain. Watching a mere government envoy, no matter how distinguished, pull out two transcendent devils and a terror out of nowhere must have been a bit of a shock for them. Especially because of how unlike the retainers of valor Sunny looked. He was neither tall nor physically imposing, and in fact appeared more slender than athletic. In addition, while pretty much everyone around him was clad in a suit of heavy plate armor, he wore only a light tunic and a pair of dainty silk shoes. It was almost as if Sunny was not taking the situation seriously, or was powerful enough to be able to disregard the protection of durable armor despite the dire danger of the situation. There was one intangible quality, though, that convinced the warriors of valor that it was the latter rather than the former presence. Space around her. Presence was often hard to describe, but it was not a secret that saints possessed a certain presence about them, and the most powerful of masters did, too. Like Jet, who emanated an illusory aura of cold, or Nephis, who sometimes seemed to illuminate the space around her. Presence was often hard to describe, but it was unmistakable. And the feeling Sunny gave off when he got serious was of the dark, cold, and deeply frightening variety. Like staring into the eyes of your killer, or maybe even of death itself. So, the warriors of valor were more than a little surprised. Obviously, Morgan was surprised the most. He stared at Sunny for a few long moments with a somewhat comical expression, then slowly shook her head and turned away. "You are a man who is full of surprises, Master Sunless. This is a good thing. We might need to pull off a miracle or two today, in order to survive." No matter how amused and curious she was, now was not the time to engage in these kinds of emotions. The battle was about to start. In fact, it was already starting. The government forces had withdrawn, but remained at a distance to observe the clash. The two armies were moving now. On the side of Song, a tide of nightmare creatures surged forward, and, shielded by it, the awakened followed. Sunny could not see the reflections in the saints, but he knew that they were out there, somewhere. Ready to strike. On the side of valor, the mounted warriors shook the ground as they moved forward, gaining speed for a devastating charge. The phalanx of awakened marched forward behind them, in perfect synchronicity, their formation like a wall of steel. Whispering blades suddenly seemed to disappear. Saint Tyrus rose into the air, assuming the form of the steel-winged thunderbird. The wind roared as she flew forward, and lightning danced around her body. Summer Night was at the tip of the wedge formation of the charging cavalry, his lance shining with resplendent light. Saint was galloping atop Nightmare side by side with him, drawing her bow with calm grace. Gods. Sunny was pulled forward, as well, following Nephis and Morgan. Jet and Cassie were near them, both with grim expressions on their faces. Only Imp seemed unaffected by the dreadful scale and meaning of the scene in front of them, scurrying forward with a wicked grin. "We are really doing it, aren't we?" As soon as he thought it, the world shook. Not too far ahead, a cloud of arrows rose from the ranks of Songs Awakened, followed by a swarm of winged abominations. All of them shot toward Sky Tide, aiming to intercept her. At the same time, the charging cavalry clashed with the sea of nightmare creatures. Just as it did, a swift black silhouette suddenly emerged from the mass of them and descended on Sir Gilead. In a flash of claws of crimson eyes, Sunny made out the figure of a giant, monstrous panther that had swiped at the Saint's Echo Mount with her claws. Silent Stalker had finally shown her transformation ability. Then, there was only chaos. A battle between Awakened could not be controlled, simply because of the nature of the people participating in it. Each of the soldiers possessed unique abilities and skills derived from them. No general, no matter how talented, could truly calculate and effectively guide such a great number of unpredictable variables. It was as though 2,000 devils were unleashed onto the desolate plain, burning with the murderous desire to destroy each other. All that the leaders of the two armies could do was set certain tactics in motion and hope for the best. And fight. In the War of Awakened, the personal valor of the combatants was much more important than in a battle of mundane soldiers, or even in one against nightmare creatures. Which meant that a single individual's contribution could also exert great influence on the outcome. This was what Sunny hoped for, at least. However, watching Valor Cavalry collide with Beastmaster's thralls, he was suddenly not sure if anything he could do would make a difference. Of course, it can. There aren't that many masters here, and among them, only Nephi's and Mordred can be compared to me. With my shadows, I am almost as valuable as a saint. So, I need to throw these doubts away, and fight. As the havoc of the bloody melee drew nearer, threatening to swallow the battle formation of Valor, Sunny suddenly heard the exhilarated voice of the Sin of Solace laughing in his ear. Fight, fight, fight. All you ever do is fight, but what have you achieved? Nothing. You failed your soldiers, you failed the people you wanted to protect, and on top of that, you even ended up in the exact place that you had wanted to escape. Pitiful fool. Do you really think that today will be any different? Sunny could even see a shadowy figure following him, its features more distinct and pronounced than ever. He smiled crookedly. Ah, it's you. You're just in time. Come on, bastard. Watch me. Then, there was no more time for idle thoughts. The cavalry had cut through the river of thralls and drowned in the ranks of Songs Awakened. The tide of abominations, meanwhile, was already mere meters away. Gritting his teeth, Sunny brandished the jade sword. And called upon the shadows. Chapter 1188, Battle of the Black Skull 2. The battle formation of Clan Valor was steadily advancing while keeping its shape, but Sunny was a poor fit for their polished tactics. Someone needed to break the momentum of the horde of the Beastmaster's thralls, anyway. There was a sea of them, ranging from pitiful dormant vermin to frightening corrupted behemoths. The charge of the cavalry had destroyed some, but countless more remained. Looking at the surging mass of abominations, Sunny couldn't help but feel a shiver run down his spine. Beastmaster. Her power was truly great and terrible. But then, he could be terrible himself. As Sunny unleashed the shadows contained within his divine lantern, a tide of darkness suddenly spread from his feet, reaching into the attacking horde. A moment later, it came alive. Kill. Sunny had come a long way in his mastery of shadow manifestation. From swiping a piece of trash from his kitchen table to binding a titan and beyond, he had never stopped improving. And now, it was time to make use of all those lessons for one single purpose. Maximum devastation. The darkness came alive, and countless inky black hands suddenly rose from it. They grabbed the lunging abominations, tearing their flesh with long obsidian claws. A wide swath of the horde was instantly turned into a harrowing hellscape of moving shadows, spilling blood, and mutilated bodies. There was a cacophony of piercing shrieks and howls, too, all of them full of chilling agony. Sunny paid no attention to the reactions of the warriors of valor. His mind was in a state of battle clarity and augmented by the shroud of dusk on top of that, but still, it took every bit of his mental ability to control that many manifested shadows. He felt as though his brain was going to explode, but as a result, the destruction he had perpetrated was on such a large scale that it almost seemed like the work of some profane deity. He only maintained it for a few short seconds, not wishing to burn too much essence, but that was more than enough. The center of the horde was utterly broken, its momentum spent. Somewhere to his left, a blinding flash suddenly illuminated the world, and another chunk of the thralls was swallowed by furious white flames. As soon as the darkness dissipated and the white flames dissolved, the vanguard of the Valor force, Sunny, Nephi's, Morgan, and Jet, were already upon the enthralled monsters. Nephi's was clad in an intricate black armor, with soft white radiance spilling from its seams. Her longsword, however, shone the brightest, cutting through the nightmare creatures like a ray of incinerating starlight. She moved with the stunning speed and ruthless elegance of a heaven-born killer. Jet was almost as deadly, although her battle style seemed much less refined. It was all about efficiency, practicality, and butchery. Even though her strikes left no marks on the bodies of her victims, the kills somehow looked more savage. Morgan, meanwhile, was like a hurricane of steel. Everything around her was cut and sliced to pieces, as if she was surrounded by a shifting field of some invisible severing force. However, there was no force, there was only Morgan herself, her body, and her sword. She was like a streak of black and vermilion, leaving misty crimson clouds in her wake. And then there was Sunny himself. This early into the battle, he was conserving his essence, so there was nothing flashy about how he fought. It was best described by the word elusive. He danced between the abominations like a shadow, easily evading the deluge of attacks and sometimes delivering swift strikes of his own. Although these strikes did not seem too powerful and only left behind small wounds, they somehow never failed to bring the creatures down. Just a few moments after the four of them dove into the horde of thralls, the battle formation of Clan Valor finally connected with the enemy. Swords rose and fell. Arrows flew. Hundreds of aspect abilities activated in unthinkable harmony. Blood spilled on the ground. Sunny was startled. What? What the hell is this? There was a limit to training and being familiar with the powers of your comrades. Sunny knew it better than most, since he had been a part of an awakened cohort before, and even led one for a period of time. He had been in command of large military forces, too. So, Sunny understood very well just how important synergy and synchronicity really were. Only when the cooperation between the members of a cohort reached the level where they could move as a single whole without the need for words would the cohort have a chance to survive. In, however, cohorts were usually small for a good reason. With how different and unpredictable aspect powers were, it was nearly impossible to bring them together in harmony, and the more awakened there were, the more difficult that task was. The difficulty grew exponentially. What the Army of Valor showed, however, was a level of unity that went beyond reason. It was not exactly perfect, but close enough to perfection to be startling. Their battle formation seemed less like hundreds of warriors fighting side by side, and more like a single being with 1,000 arms and 1,000 heads. Like a perfectly crafted war machine. It was honestly a bit frightening. Damn. Carving a bloody path through the thralls, Sunny couldn't help but pay attention to the battle formation of Clan Valor. It steadily advanced, withstanding the pressure of the horde of nightmare creatures like a moving fortress of steel. Countless abominations were dying beneath the sharp swords of the awakened warriors, and when an especially powerful creature attacked, one of the knights would step forward to face it. Arrows rained without stop. The giant tortoise was marching behind the formation, serving as a mobile fort. But even its presence could not explain how the archers were so effective in slaying the enemies without ever putting their allies in danger. It's the swords. Sunny did not have any reason to come to that conclusion, but he felt that he was right. This incredible, almost unnatural level of unity between the hundreds of awakened warriors of the great Clan Valor had to have something to do with the swords forged and bestowed on them by their sovereign. No wonder Clan Valor is famed for its battle prowess. Just how deadly would perfect cooperation be in a war? Sunny quickly adjusted his understanding of the battle, accounting for the new variable. The boon of the forged swords was, without a doubt, a powerful advantage, much more powerful than one would think. But would that boon alone be enough to turn the tide of the battle? Somehow, it didn't seem like it. No matter how Sunny looked at it, the position of Valor was still incredibly weak. What is Morgan thinking?